In this video I will show you how you should structure your code, write different variable names and such. So first, variable names. First, if it's a constant, you're gonna do all capital letters. And here, by putting .0, even though the 0 looks like it doesn't mean anything, it does, because this identifies as a float instead of an int, so that's really helpful. Next, if it's variables, variables are written lowercase, underscore, and again, lowercase letter. This is usually how you write variable names. Next, I recommend for all variables defining them. So what you can do, if you know what type of variable it is, you can do column and then write, for example, boolean equals to false. Now, if you know what value it is, false, true, it doesn't really matter. You can delete the bool and write like this, which already the variable will know that it is a type of boolean. The same goes if you do 100.0 or 100, it knows that it's an int. Now if you have an enum, it's gonna be a lowercase enum, of course, and in here you're gonna write from capital letters, so state and then curly brackets, and then here you write your states, which will be all capital letters, so idle, and it can be equal to 0, then comma, moving 1, jumping 2. Now same goes with dictionaries. Dictionary will be non-capital equals. And here, if it is a string, we're gonna do capital. So for example, white equals to 0, black equals to 1. Now, if you use variables above, so for example, variable A, variable B, replace this with A, and this with B. And of course, these variables will be non-capital. Now the same goes for animations. So if I create an animation player just for this and go to here, new animation, you can see that it already makes a non-capital underscore another word. So you can go and make animation underscore test. So this is how you write animations. And now if you go into project settings and go into input map, here everything needs to be the same as simple variables. So non-capital underscore another word. Now if you want to define another node, so you go drag it in, and it should be the same as simple variable because it itself is a variable. Now exporting variables, you can have the same, like some random variable, a type of, let's say, boolean, and make it false. Now let's say if it is an int and let's say a value of 10. Now what I recommend, if you know the variable range, you can do export underscore range, and here write from 0, let's say, to 20. And if you go to your parent node, you're gonna see the value. So the default value is 10, like written here, and you can set the value from 0. I cannot go lower. If I say minus 20, it goes back to 0, and if I do 25, it goes to 20 because this is our range. Now let's say you have a variable of a name is underscore left with a type of boolean, and let's say in underscore ready function, here you want to write some random variable, for example temp, and you want it to be 0 if is left is false, and you want it to be 10 if it is true. So instead of writing if, first you need to define, and then if is left false, and then you write temporary to be 0, and else if it is true you want it to be 10. So instead of this, what you can do is write equal, let's say if is left you want it to be 10, so if is left, and else if it is false and you want it to be 0, you can write it like this. So this saves on space and makes it cleaner. Now it's important to know that your nodes should be capital letter, one word, and then again capital letter with no underscore. Now another important thing to note is we are not using our temporary variable, so you shouldn't have unused variables as written here. As well, we get a warning for this, and if you're not planning on using the variable for some reason, this usually goes for like delta here. If you do not use, as we are using delta in this function, but if you weren't, you would do underscore, just to note to Godot that you are not planning on using the delta. So here, instead of having this warning, we can just do underscore and name it underscore temporary to name it that we are not going to use it. Now I'm gonna delete everything, and it's important to know that your created functions, if you create a function, let's say simple underscore function and just do a print of test. Basically, your function should be non-capital letters with an underscore, and you cannot put, I mean, you could, but I don't recommend you putting an underscore at the beginning, because this pretty much indicates to you that it is a Godot created function. So for example, here you have underscore physics underscore process. This means that this function is created by Godot and not by you. Now let's say we created a simple function and we think, why does it not work? Why does it not do anything? You're just gonna simply put a, I recommend, if you are not already doing this, put a print, and we can check at the top, let's say, simple underscore function, and run it. If I run it, you can see that it's constantly saying test, so that means, I forgot to put it in. Well, this seems quite simple and funny. This is a good way of testing things. Now, for example, you have different variables you want to have. So, for example, var1, var2, and var3. And here you just want to print the var1, var2, and then just print var3. Already we get an error because we need 3 different things. Here I'm gonna put our speed, just to see what speed it is. Then we're gonna put true, and then we're gonna put hello, and it works fine. If I run it, I get all of them written here. So this is fine, this works, right? But what if this was supposed to be a string as well? Then I wouldn't really get an error or anything. So instead of just having plain variables, here I can do float, because our const is float. Here I have a string, and here as well have a string. Now if I save, you already can see that this is signaling to us an error, because this isn't a string. So it's a good way to see if you made an error typing your function. And here I'm just gonna do, instead of true, I'm gonna write hello. And now I don't get an error and everything works perfectly. And go to our assets. As you can see, assets should be named with a non-capital letter, dot, and the type. Unless it is a scene or a script, it should be capital letter, like here. Now another thing you should do is do not have a lot of indents. So indents are basically these things that you press the tab and it goes to another level. You shouldn't have a lot of them because it gets complicated over time. So for example, if you have a lot of different if statements, like if that, you should try to condemn them into a smaller space. Now, for example, if I have elif speed is 100 and so on, instead of doing that, what you can do is match and then speed. And here we're just gonna write 0, do something, 1, do something, and 100 and do something. This is basically a big if statement. So if you are testing something and you're not planning on leaving, so for example, I do not plan on having a jump button, what I can do is write a hashtag, and for example, I write temp with all capital letters, and when I'm going to finish the project, I just press Ctrl F, and here I'm gonna write temporary and see, this was temporary, I do not need this, and I'm gonna just delete it. This again makes your code cleaner and is important for a good readability. And here, let's say I have a variable of radius, and it is like 10, let's say. And if I go to my physics process and I want to print out radius times 3.14, which is pi, and instead of having a plain number, I could just do pi, which will be a more accurate version of it. But what it's not pi and it's just a plain number of 5, you shouldn't have that as well. And you should go to, let's say it is a const of something, so const and then length, and it is 5, and you should, instead of just plain numbers, write the length. This will be more readable. Awesome. We are almost done, but the last thing I actually recommend doing is, even though it's very annoying and most of you probably don't do it, is write comments for almost everything you write. So here, speed of our character. First of all, if you are working with a group of people or you just suddenly stop making games and then you come back, it's gonna save you a lot of time trying to understand what you wrote in the past. And the last thing, if you have an exported variable, you should have description. So how you write description is 2 hashtags, and here you should write, let's say, put a node which will do something. Of course, be more specific because those will not help. So if you go here and hover over this, you will see that property is a node and put a node which will do something. So I hope this was helpful, you learned something, and goodbye.